in, and Lydia, interrupt me at any point if there's a chat with a question or anything, so that we can answer the questions as we need to.
I sure will.
So we're going to cover the CDS to begin with, and about 30 minutes, and then we're going to cover the improvement calculator, which is a HRET product. And so I just want to welcome you all. And Lydia, could you do me a favor, please, and read off the names of the folks that you have here that have, we have 14 now, so, or something.
Yes, we have Ashlyn Wayman, Sherry Copeland, Debbie Denson, Dee Sheridan, Francisco Gonzalez, Janice Emerson, John Blewett, Michelle Capel, Ruth Healy.
Great. Thank you. Well, I know quite a few of those names. And Michelle, I should just step aside and let you lead this one, huh? Michelle's a data analyst at Loveless Women, so I know her very well. Okay, so let's just get started here. I have a few slides to go through, nothing earth-shattering. I don't like to use a lot of information slides, so we're going to really spend most of our time working in the document itself. Let's see. Why is I seem to be frozen for some odd reason. Let me unfreeze myself here. See if I can get it to move. There we go. Lydia, do you want to do the Zoom?
Sure. Just a few Zoom reminders. If you're experiencing a bad audio connection through your computer, try dialing into the phone line. And phone numbers were provided when you launched the Zoom. If you are experiencing an echo and are dialed in over the phone, mute your computer audio by selecting the microphone icon.
Okay.
And also, if you have any questions, please use the chat. And I will go ahead and read those questions to Carlene as we go through the presentation.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so again, our agenda today for about the first half hour, we're going to cover the comprehensive data system. For those of you that have not been on it before, I think most of you have. There is the link if you want to put that down, jot that down. And then the HIN improvement calculator can be located at the HRET HIN website, and we'll go there directly also. And it's under the data section if you do want to go out and retrieve that today. I'll show you where that's at. So let's just go ahead and get started. The tools that you should have in your toolkit to work with the data for HRET are the Encyclopedia of Measures. We'll show you where that is later if you haven't gotten that yet. Any of us can provide you with the latest version. That's the HRET Encyclopedia of Measures of the National Project. The detailed measure specifications. The Encyclopedia of Measures is a moderately detailed document, but in many of the cases, to get more detail on the correct way to collect data, you need to get into the detailed measure specifications. Several of those are the Agency for Health Research and Quality, which is a part of the federal government, part of DHHS, and so they have a more elaborate explanation along with coding and things like that on the measures. There's other details, measure specifications behind that, and those are found referenced in the Encyclopedia of Measures. The data collection fact sheets, HRET has put together fact sheets for most of the data that they're collecting, and those are also found on the HIN website. And then you must have CDS access, obviously, and if you don't have that yet or haven't used a CDS, check with your HIN lead who can do that, or any of us on the team at Hospital Association. So the first poll, which this is my first experience at launching the poll, so let's see if this works, is what's your experience with the CDS? So we're going to launch this and see what happens. This is what we call a quick cycle PDSA. So go ahead and pick one if you can. We'll see if this works. Lydia, I don't think we can get responses from folks. If you out there can click on the polling, go ahead and do it. If not, oh, we got one person.
Yes, it's launched.
Okay.
We just need to vote.
Yeah, just go ahead and vote. That's fine. Let me it looks like we're going to have to launch these all at once. So let's just go ahead. Can you see all of the questions? Can everybody see all the questions?
Yes, all the questions.
Are showed up. Okay,
Yes.
well then we will be able to skip those slides. Let me see who we have. We have half the folks have been able to do it often, or working in the comprehensive data system often. We have some for data reporting only, and some rarely use it. One person rarely uses it. Okay, and then the role at the hospital, almost, well, completely quality project lead. Okay, infection preventionist is on here. And when we get to the computer calculator, it looks like one has used it before, some regularly use it, and most of you never. Well, good. Then at least everybody's heard of it. I don't see any responses there. Okay, I'm going to end this. I've got enough information to get me where I need to go now. So let's go on. I do not know why this is sticking, Lydia, but it is. It wants to stick. So we may have to run it from this direction if you can see it okay. Let's get this out of the way because we know who's in the room. So let's get started with this. We're going to go out to the CDS. Most of you have been out there. You're very familiar with it. So I'm going to put in my magic number here. While I'm doing this, I want to thank Manuel Fernandez Villadere. Did I say that right? Villadere. I've lost my Mexican Hispanic ability to pronounce names since I've been gone so long. Thank you for allowing me to use the account in here. And once that's put in, then we're going to go to the accept, of course, which everybody goes to, and you'll show right up to your data. Most of you are doing data entry, so you do know how to do it, but I'm going to just select something down here that we might want to enter data on and just run through a couple of items in case you're not familiar with these. So we're going to pretend to enter some data for Artesia's. Manuel is from Artesia. He's the quality director there. And and I know he's on the call. So we're going to pretend to enter some data in here, and I know you all know how to do that. Now, if you don't have data collected, of course, you're going to hit no, and you're going to put in a notation here, and then you're going to submit it. If you have part of your data, you can always put it in here and then just save that data. But you must submit the data to get it to show up. So always be sure you hit submit when you put your numerator and your denominator in here. The numerator and the denominator that's in here is a Cliff Notes version of what the measures are. So don't be fooled by looking at these because they won't tell you the whole story. So be sure and read your encyclopedia measures and look at your detailed data specifications. So that's really all there is to entering the data. It's as simple as that. Once you've entered it, it will show up here as having been submitted, or it will be in progress if you didn't complete the data entry and you only saved it. So data entry is the simplest part of this data entry system, or this data system. Do we have any chat yet? Any questions? Be sure and ask questions in the chat as you go along, and of course, we're at the simplest part right now anyway.
No questions yet.
Okay, good. These are simple. Okay, so this is where you're going to see your user setup. It's under admin. I hope most of you have been out to admin and have explored that. You're going to see a lot of folks in here that have access to all of the hospitals. And when you go down to the very end, you're going to see this where you can enter anybody in your organization to have access to the CDS. So you will enter their name, you'll enter their email address, you'll enter a password for them, and then you'll give them one of 3 types of access. I encourage most folks to just use Data Administrator, because if you give the other, you can only enter data or only get reporting on the data. But that's up to you. Then you're going to click here, and that person will be admitted to the Artesia, well, not to Artesia, but to your own account, your own hospital account. Now, if you want to enroll or disenroll in a measure, you'd go here, and this is the entire list of what is available. And you'll see some of these have blanks and some of them have checks. These are the ones that have been disenrolled for this particular hospital because they either don't do that or have chosen not to report on that measure. So if you have some measures you've chosen not to report on, I've gone through and cleaned up just about everybody's out of measures that you were not going to report on and hadn't put any data in on. So you shouldn't have too much trouble with this. But in the future, if you decide you want to report on a measure, let's say you decide that you are having problems with anti-coag and you were not reporting on that, you can go in and you can select that to report, hit the save button, and it'll show up on your list for you to start reporting. So this is where you would control that. Then we're going to go to reports, and we're going to spend most of our remaining time in reports, because to me that is the most interesting part of the CDS. So when you come to this section, you're going to be at the, and again, I have to thank Manuel for allowing us to use his account, because we're going to get to see a little bit of his data. So when you come to this, you're going to be at the individual measures, and this is the name of the hospital that will show up, and it should be yours in all cases. And here's your list of measures that are available to be looked at. So for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to look at a few of his measures just for experimental purposes. We're going to look at opioids here, and you will see that when you look at this, you will see what automatically comes up is your improvement target, which is based on the improvement difference between your baseline and where HRT would like you to get to in this course of the project. And you can see that this data is up and down, which you would expect for a small hospital like Artesia in a measure like this. But let's get a little bit more interest in this measure now, because this tells us a little bit, but it doesn't tell us a lot. So I like to look at the peer group average down here. And we can see what Artesia's peer group is, but I think their peer group is smaller rural hospitals. And we'll look at that in a minute. And you can also look at the entire HRET project average, or you could look at the state average. This is going to be kind of a busy slide. You hit refresh, and it will refresh this to show you where everybody else is. So you can see all these different trend lines down here bunched up. So we're all running in about the same, the groups are running about the same, and here's Artesia. You can see that occasionally they're up and occasionally they're down. That doesn't tell you a lot of information about a hospital like Artesia. So we're going to take some of these out so it's not quite so busy, and we're going to put a trend line in. Then we can see where do we stand on our trending with these small numbers, and you can see that the trend is clearly in the down direction. It's calculated in the down direction. Now, if you want to save this graph and show it to someone or send it to someone, you can either export it in a PNG, JPEG, or PDF document, or if you have the right setup in your computer, you can also right-click this and save the picture as, or copy it. And then you can copy it to a PDF or to a Word or whatever format you want to use. So that's the easiest way to manipulate this, and it will show up just like this. Once you have set your display down here, it will be good for all of your measures that you select. Now, if you don't want to look at the chart, because you can get some information off the chart, you can see your baseline, you can see your high points here. But if you want to get some more information, let's go to the data. and for this particular measure. And then the data will show us. So we want to know how many people are in those high points of opioids. How many actual people are in that? And you can see right here, 1 person, 2 people, you can see that. So you can determine at that point, is this more than what I want for a reversal agent for my patients for opioids, or is this acceptable to me? And this is your rate again, which is what was on the chart. This is the organization's rate, the median for all the state for all state organizations, or for this organization, I should say. The number of hospitals that are reporting in the state of New Mexico for this particular measure. You'll see how it drops off down here. That's because many hospitals have not yet reported their last couple of months. So this is what you want to look at up here if you're looking at what's the volume of hospitals I'm being compared to in the state, or I'm looking at as a reference in the state. Same for the project organizations. There's their rate. I don't pay that much attention to the medians because, as you see, they're not calculating very well and there's no data in there. But you can see the number of project organizations in HRT, and remember there are about 1,700 hospitals in this group. So out of the 1,700 hospitals that are reporting altogether, about 1,230 or something are on the average are reporting this particular measure of opioids. This is the rate for all the peer groups, and this is the number of peer groups that are reporting. And let's see if we can find what peer group we're in. Let's see, it doesn't have it on this one, but it will have it on another one. So we'll see what peer group the hospital is in another report. So that's how opioids would look if you were Artesia. And let's look at a couple more here just to get a sense of, we were going to put some data in on the falls. And so you can see here again, I put the trend line on, and you can see that how nicely that trend line is going down. And you can see compared to the peer group what that looks like. And also we can put in the state average, and we can see how it looks compared to our states. So we can get that. But again, this tells you something. It doesn't tell you everything because, again, you're dealing with 1 fall here, 1 or 2 falls there. So you've got to look at both your data and your chart. And I'll tell you, when I do this and do hospital presentations, I usually run my chart off, copy my chart, and then I go to the data and I pull the data out and I attach it to the chart because somebody's going to ask the question, how many am I being compared against, or how many were injured, or whatever. This is where you would export this to Excel. You always want to save it, save as. It's going to come up. That's not what I want to do. Never mind. I want to open it first. Let me open it. And it's always going to ask you about the file source. You'll put yes in there, and then it's going to come up in a web format. You'll have to save it as an Excel. But while it's in the web format, if you don't want all this stuff on here, you can get rid of it. It's just like an Excel. You can take it down to the key essential pieces that you want to look at, and then you can save it, save the raw data. Let's say you want to save the raw data for all of your measures. Then you would go here to all measures. Well, it's going to be slow, but there we go. Then you would see all the measures here, and you would go down and do the same thing, export it to Excel and go through that process. That will give you a spreadsheet of every measure, and you can manipulate it however you want to, and pull out whatever pieces that you want to pull out. We're going to go to one more here, and so we don't abuse Artesia too much with their data, we're going to go to one more here. Just make sure I've got this right. Oh, because Manuel and I talked about this last week, and I wanted to show you this because I think it's important for you to understand the logic of how the data how you can obviously use these things if you're just in there reporting and looking at things. This is their pressure ulcer data for stage 3. So I called Manuel and I talked about this, and I said, well, this is interesting because when I look at stage 2 and above, which he's also collecting, this is another argument for collecting more than one of the measures in a set, because then you can really look and see if it's correct. I'm looking at pressure ulcer stage 2 here, and I'm seeing no pressure ulcers. So we discussed that and determined that the pressure ulcer 1 data was contained in the numerator here, pressure ulcers that were present on admission. I see that a lot with hospitals, so be sure to go back to the encyclopedia measures, look at the measure specifications, make sure that your system is not reporting POAs in it. And if you're collecting stage 2 and you see no stage 2 and you see stage 3, then you know the coding system isn't working right somewhere in your hospital. So that's another type of quality improvement project. Okay, so let's see if there's anything else I want to take you to here. I think that's all of that part of it. You can, this is just a subset of the all measures, the custom data. So if you want to do a little picking and choosing in here, you can do that, but there's hardly any difference between these two different reports. Data submission will tell you what data is missing for the months that the data is open. So if I won't go into this, but you can click on this and it'll give you a list of the missing data with or the measures that are missing data for, let's say, the month of August, if you're trying to stay current. The current improvement compares your baseline to your last month of data for each of the measures. It actually shows it to you in a just pull that up and see if it'll pull up. It's being very slow right now. There we go. So this is your current, and this is all the measures that are being reported, and then this shows you what your average baseline rate is, the latest measure rate, the percent improvement. You can see Artesia has improved significantly on every one of the measures that they're reporting on. So we're looking good at that point in the target measure rate, and they've exceeded that in I believe all cases. So so that's what the current improvement is. Relative improvement will give you a relative improvement, and you can choose one or more measures. I don't use this one very often. I find it to be somewhat less meaningful. If you're going to use the improvement calculator, you're going to run a report through basic items right here. That's where you get your report, and you must use this one for the improvement calculator and no others. The data entry detail, if you're looking at your data wondering what happened and who entered that data, if you're a large hospital, you can go here. You can look over here and it will tell you the measure, when it, let's see, when it was entered, and the name of the person that entered it. So that way you can track down that person if you're curious as to how that happened. So that's your reports. No questions so far on that, I see. And then the final thing is the resources. And in the resources section, you're going to be able to go and pull some of the things that we've talked about. Here are some data collection fact sheets in here for ADEs and falls, and I think there's a couple more in here. You can also get these. There's a pressure ulcer one and a worker safety one. You can also get these on the HIN.org website. Here are some videos that will basically go over what I've gone over before, but probably not as well, of course. And this is the reporting, and there's another one out there now. This is, I think it's a fairly new one. This is your encyclopedia measures. So if you go here to download, you can go out to the HRAT-HIN website. Well, actually, this is just posted out there, but this is your encyclopedia measures that you should be following. You can see that it goes through every single measure, and it gives you links for other tools, and in the body of this it will tell you if there's a reference to any of the nationally vetted measures. The ADEs don't have that, but say County does. It'll give you the reporting protocol for CDC, etc. So let's see if I can get out of this now. So that's your resources. Let's see if there's anything else I want to show you on here. Here's your website data resources. Now we're going to go to the improvement calculator. I'll show you where that gets downloaded. Go out to the hret-hin.org website, go to data, which is up here. I don't have time today to show you the website, but it is full and rich of resources, and this is your spot right here to go to. The resource library will tell you everything you ever needed to know about most of these topics in the HIN project. So if you're in the data section and you go down here, this is where you would select your HIN improvement calculator and download it. We're not going to do that because I've already done that. If you forget what we talked about today, there is a improvement calculator tutorial here. So you can pick any one of these, and here's where all your data collection fact sheets are located also. But I encourage you, if you don't spend much time out here, to spend more time out here. This is where you would register for events and where you would pull down past events. You can pull them down either place here, and where you would also search for articles and tools. So that is really the CDS. And it's a very simple tool to use, but again, we have to start with the right understanding of the data and the right way to enter the data so that the outcome is correct when we get to the reports features. Okay, it's 12:30 your time. If we don't have questions, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here, and we're going to move to the and thank you again, Manuel, for allowing me to utilize your account. Okay, now we're going to go to the improvement calculator, and we have a couple of folks that haven't used it very much, some that have used it a little bit, and a few that have used it often. So hopefully you, those of you that have used it often have thoroughly explored this, and you won't get rid of that extra document out here. Okay, so when you come and open the improvement calculator, which you'll download from that location I showed you, there'll be a little instruction manual here that will give you some basic information, and you can click this and you can get a full set of the instructions downloaded. You'll go to data load. You can see that this is blank. These are not to be utilized at all. The row 1 is never to be utilized, but we're going to pull an example here. Of data that I've already downloaded from somebody, I won't tell you who, forever to be known as Hospital 1. And we're going to select all the data. Could do it faster, but we're going to do it this way. And then we're going to load it in here. Now, it may take you a couple of times to get it loaded. You may have to work with it a little bit, but you should be able to load it right away. I haven't had any trouble with it. So there's all our data from that is a manual step that you have to go through. Once you get the data loaded, you have to go up here and refresh it. That will update your data for you from the last time that you loaded your data in. And each time you want to refresh this, update it, you'll need to go out, pull your data and bring it in and then refresh it. Once you've done that, the first thing, because there's a series of tabs down here, we'll just go through these. The first thing you'll see is your dashboard. It'll have your hospital's name in here. Now, this dashboard is set up for both multiple hospitals and for an individual hospital to use. So you'll see that's why you have to select the name on here, because it could be multiple organization names here. So for instance, if you're a multi-hospital system like Lovelace or Presbyterian, you have access to all of the data for all of your hospitals. You can aggregate them all in here. And this has New Mexico for the state, because at the level of the hospital association, we can enter all the data and we can get a look at the state level progress. So we're going to select the hospital that I just put in, Hospital 1. And there will be a graph here. Now, I will be honest here. I have a little confession. I'm not a fan of these graphs. I don't use them very often, only because I prefer the trend lines in the CDS. They're easier to use. For me, they're more straightforward to explain to folks, but these are not too bad either. This one happens to show up as, I don't know which one has been selected here, but let's select catheter utilization is usually pretty robust. No, not too hot. Okay, we'll select readmissions. We can select anything we want to in this list. So here's the readmissions rate for the Hospital A. You can see the first line is their mean baseline. Next level is their mean target. This is their average of rates. And if this were not readmissions, we would likely have something over here. You can also do a pivot table on this if you prefer to. Okay, over here we'll give you the raw data that's being used in here. Now, let me select, let's see if I can select one that's well, again, this is probably why I don't like these that well, but but you can use them, and they do show where you are compared to your target or to your baseline. In this case, I think the baseline wasn't calculated because there possibly wasn't one. Started with 2016. So this is where the graphs are located, but you know, frankly, the graphs in the CDS are, to me, are much more robust than this and provide you with much better information. So that is frankly what I would use. And you should be able to get rate per discharge down here, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to get that. Let me try it and see in this process. It doesn't want to give it to you. It might give it to you under your setup for your computer, but for some reason I'm not getting that today. We'll move on to what is more appropriate. For this particular hospital, this is your summary table, and I'm going to refresh this data again. Okay, normally I would get, there's a section up here at the top that's not showing up for me right now, and I'm not sure why that is, but normally I would get, let's see if I can bring it down, show you. For some reason it's not showing up very well. I'm going to leave it, but up here at the top somewhere is the name of the hospital. I don't want to have to start this all over again, so I won't. But you'll see it on yours. Most of you that have used this have seen that and know what I'm talking about. So here is the summary table, and how the summary table works is you get your you get whether or not these particular measures are going to be in the total down at the bottom, which we'll look at, and whether or not they are suppressed. And in some cases, these are suppressed, and they're generally suppressed because there is no data, because the hospital does not collect that particular data. You can see that. In some cases, they are suppressed, although we can't see that here. They would be suppressed because you would already have a measure that's covering that particular measure set, so you wouldn't duplicate it. But here's all the measures this hospital is collecting, whether they're included in the total. And this is the denominator year to date, the rate year to date, the year to date improvement, and the improvement status. Need to pull that over further. Baseline numerator, baseline denominator, I'm sorry, and then the baseline rate per 1,000, whatever the denominator is, and then the target rate. This compares your current month here to your baseline, your current rate per 1,000 to your baseline, current level of improvement. You can see the minuses are negative improvement, and the pluses obviously are improvement. If there is data collected, but there are asterisks there, that most likely means that either the data wasn't available for that period of time, or there was no, in this case, there was nothing in the numerator, nothing in the denominator for ICUs. And I know what the problem with this particular one is. This would raise a red flag to me if I were a large hospital like this one is, and I would say, what's wrong with this that I don't have data in for the month of July, and why do I have zeros in there? And then I would go back and correct that if I were in that hospital. But in any case, you have your year-to-date numerator, year-to-date denominator. All of that is added up through the period of time you've reported this measure, what your measure rate is, and then over your year-to-date, and then it'll show you your improvement status. So achieved or not achieved is what you get, one or the other here. And that all gets added up. And then down here, based upon your, well, actually, it's not based upon the percent, it's based upon your numerator denominator additions, you will get where you are overall with reducing your total harm. This is the total harm for each of the measures. So this is a picture of your hospital total harm from whenever you started the project this last time, where your different baselines were, and then what you've managed to reduce in total harm. So this hospital has had 3,769 harms. Now, I want to qualify the word harm because readmissions are included in that number, and you can't always call a readmission a harm necessarily, but that's how they've included it. So 37 and 69 in the denominator, 3,769 in the numerator, 311,000 roughly in the denominator, and a rate of 12, and their target rate was 10.31 right here, you see. So the target rate of 10.31 to the year-to-date rate of 1212, and they are minus 6% not achieved. So that's by measure using the denominators for each of the measures. Now the summary table per discharge is a little bit different. Here we go. We have our headers here where they belong. In this particular one, we still have the same measures being shown here. There are also, by the way, some notes down here you'll want to pay attention to if you use this. It's similar to the one we just looked at. Here's the big difference though. This is going to tell you by discharges. So you see the baseline discharges. It's not the baseline denominator for that particular measure. It's they're using the discharges that were established at the, I believe this is the baseline discharge. Well, it is the baseline discharges. So however many discharges the hospital had during the baseline period is what's included in this baseline discharge. And so each of these is against the discharges then. And you'll see that in this table. And then you can calculate, or what's happened is the numbers have been calculated for year-to-date here, year-to-date rate per 1,000 discharges. So this is a normalizing across all the measures and a way to normalize to a certain extent across all the hospitals. These are the harms that have been prevented. The ones in red are the ones that have not been prevented, and these are calculated as harms prevented, and I'll show you where this comes from. Calculated cost per harm, then the costs that you have avoided by reducing. So if this particular hospital reduced 65 C. difficile infections at a cost of $10,000, so they reduced about almost $650,000. The mortality rate for a C. diff infection is 0.064, so they calculated the number of lives saved in the period of time from the baseline to 4 lives saved. And down here you'll see that they were able to prevent 178 harms. During that period of time, they saved about $3 million on costs that were avoided, and yet still they had a negative number of lives saved. So even though you can save money and even though you can reduce, prevent some harms, because they had 178 harms prevented, and they started off with 4,832 harms. So you can see that they were able to prevent 4 out of that. But the cost savings looks good. So if you're talking to the CFO, you want to bring up this line. And if you're talking to your doctors, you want to look at this line. And maybe you don't want to look at this line except internally. And then here's your total harms per discharge. This is just another way of expressing. This is another one of those graphs that I'm not particularly fond of, but it serves its purpose. And this is, again, your baseline, your goal, and this is your line for this hospital. However, this only represents, well, it does, it represents for each month where you are in your goal towards reducing harms per discharge. Okay, so hopefully you're with me all the way on this one. Now here are the methods that are used. If you're curious about how did they arrive at some of these figures, those are pretty well written down right here, and you can read this. I'm not going to go over this, but if you have any questions about this later on, in terms of the methodology used, don't hesitate to contact me or look at the videos or the documents that talk about the data reporting. And we have the references here, which give you for each of the measures, the references on the cost per case study, how much the cost per case was, the age of the study, and some of you can see are fairly old, and then the AHRQ, most of this all comes from AHRQ research, is the reference. So if you get a question about how valid something is, then you've got your references here, and then you can discuss and argue internally about whether one's more valid than the other, or whether this is something you want to, you know, rest your case on. But these are all right here. Let's see, the last thing would be the release notes here, which gives you what the updates are in the measures and, or in this, I'm sorry, in this calculator. And they're not terribly important, but that's the size of the calculator. So that's really what it looks like. So if it were me, when I use the calculator, after I load that data, I look at the summary table. You can print this off simply by going to File, Print, and printing it. Your version will look better than mine because for whatever reason I seem to have lost my upper lines, and I won't mess with trying to get them back. I would use these two right here for sure, this one and this one, because this makes a good argument on a cost savings, lives saved or harms prevented, I should say, and then possibly lives saved if you have a positive in there. So those are the two most important tabs on this particular document. There you go. We got finished early, didn't we? Do we have any comments at all? Ellen, you want to open your line?
Can we open the line for all participants? No. We can't. I guess we can't open the line for all participants, but we can have chats in. I've been chatting, and hopefully everyone has been seeing my chats throughout your presentation.
I hadn't been able to see them, but now I can.
Yeah. Anybody have any questions? You can enter via chat. Nobody has any questions.
Wow. I either did a really good job of explaining it or I put everybody to sleep. I'm not sure which it was. Perhaps my level of enthusiasm is not quite as it should be. Okay, let's get out of here. Okay, so I'm going to remind you that in the very beginning of this, I put my telephone number, if you don't already have it. I know some of you do already, is here in the very first slide. So if you want to contact me after this and ask any questions, or if you run into a snag, I will tell you that these are the simplest tools I've ever used for collecting and reporting data. So I can't imagine anybody would have significant problems. The problems that we run into with our hospitals really stem from not taking the time, or even if you take the time, sometimes it's difficult to understand the purpose, understand the data definitions and the purpose of the reporting. The best guidance I can give you is that if you're reporting something and it is not something that can be attributable to your work in the inpatient setting, then you should not include that population. So if you are wondering whether you need to include something for CAUTI or something for CLABSI or whatever, ask yourself, is this something that was attributable to me? Now, most of you are going through NHSN to report. Almost all of you are. So their algorithms are going to be very strict in NHSN, which is one reason why we utilize that system. But for other measures, pressure ulcers, again, is another example. Ask yourself, should I report this? Do I know for sure this is not a POA? And if you think it might be, then you need to go back and look at your system. So we're only interested in those things that you can control and you can make a change in. Don't report folks that are already being admitted for severe hypoglycemia, for instance. Don't report folks that have been admitted because their warfarin was 200 or something ridiculous. Well, it never gets to that, but let's say 12 or 15. So just remember that when you're looking at your data. Any questions, feel free to ask me or ask Ellen, and we'll try to get the answer for you if we don't know it. Appreciate you all being on the call today. I wish I could talk to you. I would much rather talk to folks than just talk to myself. But
yeah, that's the beauty of or ugliness of Zoom. Anyway, we didn't have any questions. We had a couple thank yous. Lori from Los Alamos said that she might have to play with it for a while, but everybody else said thank you very much for the info. So as Carlene said, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact Carlene or me or Lydia, and we will find the answer for you. And we'll go ahead and close the webinar, and thank you very much for your attendance.
Bye-bye, folks.